Okay, so hello, everyone again. We're going to do just a review of the formal elements of painting, and then I've got to show a number of brief videos on the topic to do with light, composition, shading, things, color wheel, things like that. And then the second half, got a really good hour-long video, BBC on the color white. I didn't show that before. We haven't seen that, right? On the history of white. It's really interesting. So speaking of colors. All right, so I'm going to do share screen here. What happened to my Word document? How did it open? Okay.
There it is.
I'll explain it. Here it is. Everybody see my desktop? All right, let's go for it. And mute your mics while I'm showing the videos, and then I want to invite comments just on mute.
Joe, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm on my phone, so I don't know how to do anything. I'll try to be very quiet.
All right.
If I can be such a thing.
My computer's a little slow. I had like this emergence message, you know.
How does what you
hacked right before? It wasn't. I just had to shut it down and restart it. They want me to go a certain, so this.
see in an artwork tell you how to look? The visual qualities of an artwork shape the way we look at it and the meaning we take away. An artist might use a point of view that confronts us with a stern gaze, or sightlines to hint at something we don't see. These strategies set up a dynamic relationship between artist, artwork, and viewer. Considering what is and is not visible in an artwork, or how the artist positions us in relation to the subject, can help us think more deeply about social position, setting, and gender. Let's look at a few examples. This beaded crown from Nigeria was made by one of Africa's largest ethnic groups, the Yoruba. The crown's form and patterns were intended to communicate the king's royal power and his ancestral connections to his subjects. A key part of the conical crown is its beaded veil, which protects the king's subjects from the potentially dangerous power of his gaze. The veil is also meant to hide the king's individuality, activating the abstracted faces adorning both the front and back of the crown. These represent the king's ancestors, whose power to see in both this world and the supernatural one are symbolized by the face's protruding eyes. The birds represent the essential support of women in the community. The king's senior wife is perched at the very top, reflecting another social hierarchy. Today in a museum, we can take a close look at these meaningful forms, but what we don't see is the crown in its original ceremonial context. On the other hand, Paris Street Rainy Day, painted by Gustave Caillebotte in 1877, was always meant to be seen in an art gallery. Born into the Parisian upper class, Caillebotte was much like the wealthy man in this painting. His education provided access to tools like the camera lucida, enabling him to picture the changing world in a new way. Caillebotte created this life-size street scene soon after the city underwent a massive modernization project. Organized around key buildings like the Arc de Triomphe, the radiating plan allowed officials to more easily control the way different social classes interacted. The painting's large format draws us into Parisian modern life at the end of the 19th century. The scale of the work connects us to the painting's fashionable couple in the foreground, while the plunging perspective distances us from members of the working class in the background. While Cayabat's painting reflected his contemporary world, American photographer Cindy Sherman found ways to critique it. Fascinated by television, costume, and makeup, she first gained recognition in the 1970s for a photo series that evoked films of the 50s and 60s. Always casting herself as the subject, Sherman suggests a range of submissive female roles. In untitled film still number 92, Sherman depicts a vulnerable subject cowering on the ground. She crops the image tightly and arranges the shot so that the viewer is looking down on the female subject from a position of power. Though it resembles a film still, the image is actually a standalone photograph without an accompanying story. Here, Sherman harnesses the power directors have in placing their audience within a scene. Because her character isn't looking directly at us, she doesn't challenge our gaze. We can look as long as we want, but remember, Sherman created this scene, so ultimately, she's the one directing our viewing experience. From the veiled Yoruba crown to Cayabat's panoramic Paris and Sherman's provocative film still, understanding how we look helps to give an artwork meaning. Next time you're in a museum, consider how the power to look shapes your experience of other works of art.
Power of the look.
So do you have any comments on that? So I think what I get out of that, I think what she's saying is the way the artist arranges the scene and the objects has implications for social class, culture, gender issues, power issues, intimacy issues. And so it's good to be aware that and it could be done unconsciously by the artist to reinforce those values, or it could be done as a comment, so to increase our awareness of them, or to be ironic about them. Scientists realize that there is no such thing as an objective viewpoint, that the viewer, very active studying or doing experiments on electrons, for instance, influences their behavior. There's no such thing as, same thing with looking at a painting in a way. We're being influenced by the subtle, oftentimes composition, colors, and so it helps to know a little bit about the historical, cultural context of the era, if it's an earlier era, ERA.
I don't understand it.
Any comments, any thoughts? This gets into a little more of the technical aspects.
What makes paintings feel as deep as the view from a window or as flat as a wall? Paintings have a literal surface, one we're not allowed to touch with our hands. But they also have a conceptual surface called the picture plane that divides reality from the painted world. To better understand this idea, let's look at a few examples. Here is St. John the Evangelist writing the New Testament book of Revelation, painted by French artist Nicolas Poussin in the 17th century. Working in Rome and drawing inspiration from the city, Poussin organized his paintings with the clarity and balance you find in Renaissance painting and classical architecture.
You can't hear anything? Marge?
Nope, I can't hear anything or see anything except your face now.
How about other people?
We can hear.
We can hear fine.
Can you see that?
Yeah, we can see it too.
And you saw the last one, the last video? Marge, did you see the last
Yes.
video?
Yes,
I
even
saw
though
the
I
last
didn't
one.
understand it.
I guess maybe I need to leave and come back, huh?
Yeah, I think you do. Because I'm doing screen sharing and it's,
Yeah,
so-
all's clear, both
yeah.
voice and picture.
Okay, all right. So something with your computer, Marge.
Okay.
All right, okay.
Look at the way he imagined the Greek island of Patmos. Notice how it feels like you're simply looking through a window? Poussin composed the scene to lead your eye from St. John in the foreground through the landscape to the mountains in the distance. Now, let's deconstruct the painting. See the layers of depth? Each part recedes further back from the picture plane. When we put it all back together, the elements create an ordered, peaceful setting for writing about the end of the world. If Poussin and other artists make us feel like we can enter the space of their paintings, then others, like William Michael Harnett, create the illusion that we're seeing a real object, like grapes or a rusty lantern, rather than just a painting of one. This technique is sometimes called trompe-l'oeil, meaning to fool the eye in French. In the work for Sunday's dinner, effects of painted light and shadow, and visible brushstrokes, and details like the rusted hinges and floating feathers trick our eyes into seeing three-dimensional objects. It's not a window into another world, but it also appears to be more than just a flat painting. Imagine the painted illusion in 3D space. See how the rooster seems to break the picture plane, pushing into our world? Harnett's technique was so convincing that officials seized his painting of a $5 bill for being counterfeit. Not every artist aims to create an illusion. Pete Mondrian wanted you to know you were looking at a painting, so he employed different techniques like recessed frames and hanging his works high on the wall. Most of the works that Mondrian painted between the 1920s and 40s were composed of different arrangements of color, line, and shape. In this painting, he worked with verticals, horizontals, and primary colors until achieving a visual balance on the surface of the picture plane. If it looks simple, it's not. Consider the fact that Mondrian never used a ruler or straight edge to achieve this effect. From Poussin's window-like views to Harnett's trompe-l'oeil illusions and Mondrian's flat forms, you perceive these artworks differently because of the way each artist used the picture plane. Next time you're in a museum, consider how the picture plane influences your perception of other works of art.
So for landscapes in particular, it's useful to look at a foreground, middle ground, background. The middle ground may contain two sections like that Poussin painting, but and then I always look at how does the artist draw my eye through that landscape. You know, what's the, often there's an S-curve that takes you through the landscape, but it doesn't have to be that. It could be a zigzag line, it could be, you know, if there's a road, but they can do it various ways with objects, with use of color, with atmospheric perspective. So I always look at that with landscapes. And the general rule is that the more saturated colors, the brightest, lightest lights and the darkest darks are going to be in the foreground because that's how we perceive. And then as you move back, and this creates the illusion of perspective, the middle ground is going to be, the colors will be less saturated. Maybe the artist has been graying them down. And that's because in real life, more air or atmosphere comes between us and those middle ground objects, more sky. And that has an effect of softening the image, and desaturating the colors. And then in the background, the far background, where it's mountains or horizons, that's where the atmosphere starts to take over, and the objects become more diffuse, more color, more desaturated. Now, if you're painting, if an artist painting a sunrise or a sunset, then that's tricky because you have this intense light and usually in the background. Okay, so. So he's got to do that very skillfully, because wherever the most saturation is, that's where your eyes going to go. And I can usually tell how experienced an artist is, because what we're talking about is how the artist uses values. Values being the whitest whites to the darkest darks, and so colors, every color has a value. Okay, so sometimes they'll have a saturated value in the middle ground, and you understand what they're doing from objects wise, but they're confusing your eye if they haven't got that mastery of values, in particularly with a landscape. With abstracts, and the surface tends to be more flat than all this. Usually the artist isn't worried about perspective, so everything, all the colors like in the Mondrian are equally saturated. Okay, and by that so it's all foreground. So that keeps gives a flat plane perspective, and it keeps your visual inches right there on the surface.
Joe, how about the use of shadows? Does
Yeah,
that
well,
help?
that's part of it. Yeah.
Because I noticed on the geometric painting, there's no shadows, but when
Right.
you look at the other paintings, there's shadows that gives you that sense of depth.
Well, shadows imply that there's a light source, often the sun. It could be in a room, could be a candle or an artificial light. So there's going to be shadows thrown. And I'm going to have it. There's a whole video here on that. But it's a uniform light. In the Mondrian, it's the light source is maybe from the behind, and it's equally illuminating all the forms in there. There's geometric forms, and so they're not three-dimensional. Only three-dimensional objects are going to cast shadows. They're flat, so it's not a real world space with three-dimensional forms. Okay, it's an abstract space, so there's no shadows, and it's a uniform light. If you start putting shadows in, then that starts reminding people of the real world, of the physical world, and that's not what we wanted to do. Here you go, light and shadow is the next one. These are videos by the Art Institute are good. I think they're helpful.
How does an artist use light to help keep us out of the dark? Light reveals the world around us, while shadow obscures it. But without contrast between the two, we wouldn't see shapes or forms at all. Artists use light in a variety of ways: to tell the story, to create a mood, or even as the medium itself. Let's look at a few examples. This is The Two Disciples at the Tomb, painted in 1906 by American artist Henry Ossawa Tanner. Born in Philadelphia, he spent most of his career in Paris, the city of light, and developed a uniquely modern approach to religious subjects. In this painting, Tanner represents the moment when two disciples of Jesus Christ discover his body missing from his tomb. The scene has two kinds of light: a soft, natural glow coming from inside the cave, and a supernatural light that radiates from John himself. With yellow and white highlights, Tanner illuminated John's face and chest, as well as outlined his profile, giving him a radiant glow to suggest his faith. Peter, who denied Christ, is mostly composed of darker, earthy browns and peach tones. By using light to tell the story, Tanner creates something miraculous. 600 miles away in Germany, Käthe Kollwitz created art that reflected her personal experiences of suffering and loss using experimental etching techniques. Traditional etching involves scratching lines into a coated metal plate. After it's treated in an acid bath and inked, the etched lines appear as dark areas on the print. Kollwitz's etching, Battlefield, represents the aftermath of a 16th century peasant revolt. A woman shrouded in black searches a field for her son. Her lantern light reveals a single anguished face among many corpses. Kollwitz creates this ominous scene without using color. Instead, she concentrates areas of etched lines to create darkness and leaves key sections more sparsely inked. What appears as a flash of light is where Kollwitz smoothed the plate so ink wouldn't adhere to it. It's through this strategic placement of light that Kollwitz exposes the horrors of war and poverty. While it may have been complicated for Kollwitz to create light with her etching, for Dan Flavin, making light was the easy part. Living in New York City in the 1960s, Flavin created art from industrially produced materials, the stuff of everyday America. Monument for V. Tatlin is one of a series of works inspired by early 20th century Russian sculptor Vladimir Tatlin. Tatlin strived to combine artistry and engineering in his work, sometimes on a massive scale. His design for this monumental structure celebrated the promise of the modern age. Flavin used fluorescent lights to evoke the geometry and spirit of Tatlin's design, though for him light wasn't spiritual or emotional. He was more interested in working with the physical qualities of light. Flavin spent a lot of time considering the arrangement of the fluorescent tubes and how that light would interact with its surroundings. And because fluorescent lights eventually burn out, Flavin always included an instruction manual detailing replacement tube specifications for museums and galleries. By transforming the mundane into the monumental, Flavin lit a path for future artists to follow. From Tanner's depiction of light as a holy symbol, to the moody shadows cast by Kollwitz, and Flavin's sculpting of fluorescent tubes, our perception depends on an artist's use of light. Next time you're in a museum, consider how light influences your perception of other works of art.
So that's always a good question
How-
to ask when you're looking at a painting or going to a museum, because one of the questions or one of the things to observe is what kind of light is the artist's painting. If it's a realistic scene, interior or landscape, where's the light source? If it's from the sun, is it coming from upper left, upper right, is it coming from straight ahead? And how does he make that clear in his painting? If it's an interior scene, where's the light source? Is it a lamp, or is it both a lamp and light coming in through the window? So an artist needs to be aware of that because everything has to be consistent in terms of how light diffuses across the surface of a face, for instance, and on furniture, cloth. And if it's coming from, say, the upper right, then he's got to just keep that in mind at all time. Vermeer being like the great master of light. Abstract paintings generally don't use shading or light as it softens or moves across the surface for the most part, unless they're trying. You can do perspective in an abstract, it can have depth, but if it's a flat surface that they're conveying, again, it's usually just one light it's like you're in a lit room and it's just the same light across the surface with no shadows. Because he's not, again, shadows reinforce the idea of space and perspective, and most abstract painters want to eliminate that and do something else, with their geometric forms, for instance, or just color, like that artist did with the fluorescent tubes. Just focus on how color influences us, the moods it creates, and detaching it from objects that have emotional appeal, like a person, and just fluorescent tubes, but it's emitting lights and it's actually creating soft shadows around each of those tubes. So there's an ambience it has. So you got to just like in that room where he's doing that series and fluorescent lights. If I'm in there, I'm thinking, what's the mood that's being evoked as I'm moving through it inside. Okay. Here's another one. I got several on white.
Hello, Internet. My name is Dorian. I've spent the last 10 plus years teaching and developing a course on drawing realistic light and shadow. And as of today, you can watch lessons from that course right here on YouTube. Enjoy.
A young guy, looks like 28. When did he said 10 years? When did he start? When he was 18 or something?
In this course, I'm going to talk a lot about light and shadow in art and how you can use them to make beautiful drawings and paintings. But wait, what is light? Light is energy. To be specific, it is electromagnetic energy. This is the same type of energy as gamma rays, X-rays, microwaves, or radio waves. What we call light is actually just a particular range of electromagnetic energy that our eyes and brain have evolved to perceive. We can see this visible light as brightness and color. Physicists think of light as a wave or a particle. For our purposes, it is most useful to think of light as light rays. Let's establish a few principles. A light ray originates from a source. It then travels in a straight line, and when it hits a surface, it is reflected. What happens at this moment of reflection is extremely important. A useful way to study it is with a laser and a mirror. This is the incoming light ray. We can call it direct light because it's coming directly from the light source, whether that's a sun or a laser or anything else. And here is the reflected light ray. We can call this indirect light. Notice that the reflected ray is weaker. Every reflection or every bounce costs energy and weakens the light. Now,
And also, depending on the surface, some of that original light, which contains all colors, is absorbed, and some gets reflected. Depends. An apple is red because all the other colors are absorbed except for red light, and it's the red that bounces up, gets reflected, and we see red. A leaf is green for the opposite reason. All the colors on the red side of the spectrum are absorbed by the leaf except for green, and then it's the green that gets reflected, and that's what we see. Artists know that, like I think I mentioned this before, oftentimes in the Renaissance when they're glazing and doing a face, Rembrandt was a master of this, Vermeer. The faces, skin has a pinkish tone because of the blood, and so what's the opposite of red is green. So often on the undercoat, the first thin layers of paint are green. So what happens is that, and then they'll paint the red over that. So then the red is getting, wait a second, did I get it backwards? No, hold on. Green light is absorbed, red light. So red light is absorbed, and yeah, it's absorbing everything but the red light, and then the red light's reflected from underneath upwards, so it gives an inner glow.
let's do it with 3 rays. The surface that the laser shines on is a mirror. Because of this, all the rays are reflected perfectly. This type of reflection is called a specular reflection, from the Latin word speculum, or mirror. On a microscopic level, a mirror is an incredibly smooth surface, but most materials are not that smooth. For example, skin.
I just realized I got that explanation backwards, I'm sorry. An apple's red because it's absorbing the red light and reflecting back the green light. That's what it is. So it appears red. That's my mistake. So the artist is painting the undertone green of a face, so that it's absorbing absorb the green, the light, and reflect back the red. So that is what gives it the inner glow.
Look something like this microscopically. It's irregular. And when we shine the laser on this irregular surface, we're getting a different type of reflection. This is much more common and it's called diffuse reflection. Whenever you think about the light having an effect on the form, the actual shading, that is diffuse reflection. Here's an example. And whenever you think of reflective materials like chrome, that's the effect of specular reflection. Most materials in the world around you have both aspects, specular and diffuse reflection. What many people call the highlight is a specular reflection. The shading that creates the three-dimensional cylindrical form is created by diffuse reflection. Mastering that volumetric shading is going to be our focus for this course.
So again, I'm looking at painting. If it's a realistic painting that involves volume, how did the artist do it? And it's done differently.
Here's an overview of what's in the course.
Done differently at different periods in history. They tended to go from use darker colors, say that to create shadow. They are say the Renaissance but in the modern times, particularly starting with the Impressionists, they're not just darkening the to create volume for an apple. Say Cézanne, when you look at his apples, he's not just adding dark colors to the red or the pink or he's using different colors, okay, and with value in mind. So it doesn't matter what color you're using, you get the values right. So if the light's shining most intensely on a certain part of an apple that's red, he could use a violet or any color that's the appropriate value for that section where the light's getting diffused. Okay, and it's not just darkening the original color that where the highlight, where the brightest is, and that's what the Impressionists did. So it's using color, the appropriate value to create volume, and that was a breakthrough in the 19th centuries. Oops.
There are 8.
So what I was saying is, notice how the artist has created volume on a face or a jug or anything.
When you draw something, for example a portrait, you might think that you're drawing.
What's their technique for doing that? And how well did they do it? Okay, how well did they create that diffuse light? How did they do it? What colors did they use? And keeping in mind, the most the most saturated color, this is the foreground lights right here, where the light's hitting more directly, and then it fades away and gives a sense of curvature and volume by the values getting less intense. Okay? So the darkest dark is here, and the lightest light is here, like the foreground of the landscape. It's right there, and as it moves away from that, it gets more diffuse. Okay? And as this line here, this curved line, makes it more seem like it's closer to your eye, and the same with the highlights. That's the point. And so the cheek, the peak of the top part of the cheek, literally is closer to your eye compared to the hollows, compared to here. And the chin is close. The tip of the nose and up here. Okay. So by keeping that in mind, the artist keeps that in mind, so they're going to put the most saturated colors and the darkest darks, and give that sense of a curvature of the face.
An eye or a nose. But what you're actually doing is drawing the effect of light on these forms that we call noses and eyes. There's a reason behind everything you see, and these reasons can be understood. That's precisely what this course is about. The fundamental distinction we make at the beginning is the distinction between light and shadow. You can think of this as two countries, the country of light and the country of shadow. There's a border separating these two countries. Unfortunately, there are many different names people use for this border. Some call it shadow line or shadow edge, some call it bedbug line, and some even call it core shadow, which is a good approximation, but not quite accurate. I personally really like the word terminator. This is what astronomers call the dividing line on a planet between the dark side and the illuminated side. I like the word terminator because it reminds me that the light terminates at some specific point on the surface. Let me show you what I mean. Let's move the camera so that we can see what the light can see. You might notice that there's no shadow on this head right now. That's because what the light sees is, by definition, illuminated. It is in light. We are now looking at the lit side of this head. If we leave the light at the same position, but move the camera a little bit to the side, we can see the shadow again. This means that the terminator marks the boundary of an area that the light sees in quotes. What the light can't see is what falls into shadow. For any given light source, there's no ambiguity about this. Either something is in light or it's in shadow. Let's look at this drawing again. I hope you agree that the sense of light and the sense of form are working fairly well. This is because I chose to pay close attention to finding the terminator and maintaining a clear separation between light and shadow. Once this first step was achieved, I was able to systematically take the drawing further by using more advanced light effects. Are you ready to learn how to do this? Well, tighten your seatbelt because we're about to go deep. May I introduce to you the sphere. It will help us to create realism by understanding light effects. Since we were just talking about the terminator, can you find it on the sphere? It's right here, separating light and shadow. The part of an object that is in light is called form light, whereas the part of an object that's in shadow is called form shadow. Go figure. It is very useful to distinguish between form shadow and the cast shadow. The form shadow is part of an object you're drawing, but the cast shadow is the result of a projection. Light is hitting the sphere and is projecting the cast shadow onto the floor. By the way, did you know that the shape of the cast shadow is created by the shape of the terminator line? That's pretty cool and pretty nerdy, but you came here to learn, so I'm giving you everything I know. Alright, these are the 4 basic light effects that allow us to separate light and shadow. There's form light and form shadow.
And one thing that the Impressionists did that was revolutionary in the past, this cast shadow was painted by artists as dark, probably using blacks. They're assuming there's no light here. And they were painting indoors. They didn't paint outdoors much. So when the Impressionists started painting plein air and squinting and looking at the shadow of a tree cast or bushes cast, you really see that there is light in here. There are colors in here. Okay, it doesn't just go black. So they started painting, putting muted, often violets, but or some even grayed out reds, and that was totally original. And actually, that's true, particularly outdoors, to our experience, for visual experience. That way, we perceive there are colors in the shower, and it's there's the reflected colors from the object. Okay, so there's not just light, but the light contains color. So if the object's red, for instance, if this billiards ball, if that is red, then it's going to be casting some red light in here. Okay? And then you also think of the complement of red, which is green. And so artists would probably put the complementary color in too. But not real saturated, because that'll make it, it's not the way we perceive. It's in terms of values, that red in the cast shadow is on the dark end. Okay. There's not a lot of, it's still red, but it's not a lot of light in it. Okay. Whereas the red here is going to be lit up and super saturated. Okay. And so on the value side, it's going to be up on the white, towards the white end of it. If you got a 10-point scale between black and white, the red values that red are going to be at a 9 or so. So if it's a strong light. And whereas the value of the red here would be a 2, maybe, or 1. Still red, but just different values.
And there's the terminator, which separates the two and projects the cast shadow. You can do a lot with these 4, and it's important that you understand them.
All right. So I'll move this one is basic to light, so let's move to line, another formal element.
When the stakes are high at work, your tone matters.
So, what kind of lines are there? Some artists say lines are the most important element. Other artists say color is the most important element.
Line is a path of a moving point. It is a starting place for most art creations. It is the most basic and fundamental visual element. So what do we know about lines? There is an endless number of lines that you see and use in art. But technically speaking, there are only 2 types: straight lines and curved lines. The rest of them are combinations or variations of these 2 types. When it comes to line styles, you can group them into 4 style categories. First, a solid or continuous line. Second, all kinds of interrupted or broken lines. Dashed lines, dotted lines, footprints, or time marks.
So another way artists will create perspective is through the use of broken lines of color. You could have a color in the same color in the foreground on a line, and then it's broken. You don't see it for a while, then it appears again in the middle ground, different value, and then it appears again in the background, in a different value. And so it's a broken line, but your eye will make the line complete. Okay, you do it. Your mind does it. You complete it. So the use of interrupted lines is a subtle way that artists will create a movement through a painting, and also can reinforce the perspective.
Fit into that category. Next, implied lines are the lines you assume. These lines are not actually drawn, but you can see them as a border between other elements, or a sudden change in their characteristics. A good example would be horizon line. It's not there, but you see it. And finally, psychological lines are the lines that are not physically there. You cannot see them. They are generated by our minds based on other elements. If used properly, they guide viewers' eyes and attention to where an artist wants them. It is a very powerful tool that is used in compositions and graphic design. So here are the 4 styles again: solid, interrupted, implied, and psychological. We use line in all art creations at some point or in some degree. Here are just a few examples. Line is used for sketching, gesture, and contour drawing. You can create an image with just one line or make it complex and detailed. Line can be used as the only element in an artwork. Here are some examples: a line drawing by Pablo Picasso and sketches by Edgar Degas. We use lines to define objects in space, to outline shapes, or sketch thumbnails and plan a composition layout before painting. All shading techniques are based on the use of lines. Whether straight strokes are used or curved ones, parallel marks or cross-hatching, they are all using some kind of line drawing. You can use longer strokes for quick shading, or a variation of strokes to show depth, tonal values, and texture. In addition to shading techniques, line as an element can be used alone to add depth in an artwork. Manipulating line, bending it, changing its thickness, you can achieve an illusion of three-dimensional objects in space. See how lines wrap around the folds to support the form, adding value and space at the same time. And how they follow every facial detail in this portrait of Dürer. Etchings, engravings, and other print media would be a good example of this technique. Line is your greatest support tool. Lines assist you in drawing using the grid method, constructing forms and objects by using temporary structure lines, working with linear perspective. Grid method is a traditional way to transfer or scale images. As you draw, you go through a process of using temporary lines, layout marks, building forms with axis lines for symmetrical shapes and surfaces, invisible or behind structural lines, and other supporting elements. Receding lines are the key to building a linear perspective. You cannot draw a realistic picture without using them. Of course, we use line to decorate. From simple and elegant patterns to heavily ornate and complex designs. Graphic designers use line in their work to decorate and at the same time lead the eye, emphasize, organize, and add structure to the content. Abstract designs and drawings is another common use of line element. Op art or optical illusions is a good example. You can probably come up with more line uses. Think about it. Believe it or not, but lines have feelings. By changing the way you draw or shade, you can change the meaning and the message of your artwork. There are certain ways our brain processes.
Generally, you could say that a curved line has a more feminine quality to it, and straight lines would have a more masculine quality. So many of the newer modern architecture, more and more since the 80s, 90s, are using more and more curved structures. Modern architecture, well, architecture was using up until probably the 80s, was using predominantly straight lines in the buildings. But now with computer technology, computer assisted design, they can do some of them are just amazing. Then skyscrapers, twisting and turning, and it has a more organic, I guess. So they say there's no straight lines in nature. Some lines look straight, but not quite. So there's a more art and architecture that uses curved lines. Will have a more organic feel and also a more feminine feel, and maybe a more soothing feeling. I know there's buildings, places in England, where they are designed for recuperating from cancer. And they're specifically designed buildings that promote healing in the architecture and the shape of the furniture, and getting away from rectangular rooms and rectangular lines, 90-degree angles, mostly curved lines. So there's research to show that curved lines have a healing effect, a soothing effect, a relaxing effect. And straight lines are more, I guess, more aggressive or more assertive. Either where they're going vertical or horizontal, they're going somewhere. And there's a kind of an ego sense to it. Maybe, yeah. So the kind of lines that are in a painting can work on you subconsciously. Jagged lines are going to create a certain feeling, certain tone, maybe tension, stress, as opposed to the, a wave-like pattern, which it's going to have a more soothing effect subconsciously on you. So it's good to just to look at kinds of lines that predominate. It could be mixed. The painting or drawings can have a mixture, can have both. So just observe that.
And interprets what we see. Look for yourself. Horizontal lines generally look quiet and calm. They suggest some space and distance in an artwork. Vertical lines, on the other hand, give an impression of height and balance, support and strength. Curved lines are special. They are very comforting comparing to straight lines. They're elegant and graceful. So if you want to add some ease to your work, use more curves. Here is a line that creates all kinds of energy. Zigzags can suggest an anxiety and confusion, or an excitement and energy. It's all in the context. Parallel lines, especially if they're angled, give an impression of speed and movement. Slanted lines are also full of energy. They support movement and action in an artwork. They can also emphasize and lead viewer's eye to a specific spot in a picture. Overall, the quality and characteristics of lines that you use contribute to the mood of your artwork. Use lines meaningfully and responsibly.
Sometimes you don't see the lines. They're not always very obvious. Usually the first thing that people notice is color. And I say, well, what do you like about the painting? I like the color. And they won't see the lines or the arrangement of objects, the composition. So it's an acquired taste or ability to move, to not just evaluate or stop at the color of a paint. Color is important, and how they're using colors, but there's so much more. And painting that's working or influencing the viewer in a less obvious way.
If you're 55 and up, T-Mobile has plans built just for you. Whether you need a single line or lines for family members, you'll get great value on America's smart.
Value.
Imagine there was no light. How much would you see? Not much. And now you can see. As light bounces off the objects, it molds them by creating lights and shadows. Value is the amount of light reflected from a surface. Value as an element of art refers to lightness and darkness in an art piece. Light source plays an important role in the way we see things. Some objects are darker and some are lighter. How does it work? Light objects reflect plenty of light. Dark, very little. Black, none. The amount of light reflected from a surface is affected by many things. like brightness of the light source, or position of the light source in regards to the object, distance to the light source, value and color properties of the surface itself, how a surface is facing the light. Two surfaces of the same object cannot be of the same value if they are facing the light source at different angles. If the angle changes, the value changes. This is how we distinguish sides in an object. Reflected light. Light bounces off every surface it reaches. That includes ground, walls, all objects and everything around them. When objects are close to each other, they share some of that light that they reflect. So how dark or light are the objects around? How close are they? How much light they can reflect? All that affects each object's value. Background value. Same object can look lighter or darker against different backgrounds.
And color.
Texture and reflective properties of the surface.
That's important. I want to go back to that.
Texture and reflective properties of background value. Same object can look lighter or darker against.
In a painting, if you want one object to really pop out, a little secret. Let's say you've got a red small object. If you put a grayed down version of its complement behind it, so the complement of red is green. If you put a muted green behind a bright red, that red's going to pop out much stronger than if it was a different color in the background, a blue, for instance. It'll make it look, the red will look redder. But if you put that, but it's the same red, how intense it appears to the eye will depend on what's the colors that surround it. And so you can take advantage of the color wheel by and the object going to pop out. Now, if you were to put red with its complement equally saturated, equally intense, it's like Christmas decorations. It's not going to work. It has to be a grayed down version of its complement. So it's say violet and yellow are complements. So if you wanted a yellow object, shirt or hat to really pop out in a painting, you surround it by a muted version of violet behind it somehow. And if you want the object to really stand out.
Different backgrounds. Texture and reflective properties of the surface. Each surface reflects light differently. Nature of the light source: natural high contrast or diffused light, an artificial spotlight, or an ambience light. So here is what affects value. Brightness of the light source, position of the light source, value and color properties of the surface, at what angle a surface is facing the light, reflected light from the environment, background values, reflective properties of the surface, and nature of the light source. As light shines on objects, it generates lights and shadows. Value creates depth within an artwork, making objects look three-dimensional, appear closer or further away. It does this by creating a range of tones within an object itself and its background. Different sides of an object cannot have the same value if they are not facing the same direction. Value of a surface changes as it changes its position to the light source. This change can be very defined or smooth and gradual. How do we measure the differences in light and dark? The lightest value is white. The darkest value is black. What about the range of values in between? We use
Okay, so this is what I was talking about, the scale from, and you could do it for any color, it's not just black or white. You could take blue and you can have a bright intense blue up here, and then tone it down, down, so it's still blue, but its value is at its darkest point. Okay? And by taking advantage of that, you can create a volume in an object by just understanding how the values shift as it moves, as the part of the object is moving away from the light source.
a value scale. Value scale is a way of describing how values change between black and white. One of the most well-known is the Denman Ross 9-step value scale. His value terms are useful and easy to memorize. Take a look.
So you can take any color and put it, any color, your shirt, anything, and it's going to fall somewhere in between here. It's close to closest for the value of it. And artists are, when they go to art school, it's one of the first things they're trained to be able to do consistently in a painting, if they're doing, particularly if they're doing realism.
Starting from white, highlight, light, low light, mid value, high dark, dark, low dark, and black. So what did we learn about value so far? Value is the amount of light reflected from a surface. It refers to lights and darks in an artwork. Light plays an important role in how we see things. Objects that reflect plenty of light, we see as light objects. Objects that reflect little or no light at all, we see as dark. The amount of light that a surface reflects determines its value, and it is affected by many things. Value creates depth and space in an artwork. It makes flat shapes look three-dimensional. We use value scales to measure and describe values. And now you're ready to move on to the next part.
Let me show you painting. Let's see here. I can call random painting. Random paintings. Here we go. Let's see. All right, so this painting is a good example having the artist understood values, and he created a atmospheric perspective, and he's created a foreground, which is actually most of the paint. Foreground doesn't have to be, it's not equally, the canvas isn't divided in equal amounts, foreground, middle, it's up to the artist. So the foreground is here. And it's actually, if you can include the top of these yellow trees, it's actually almost 2/3 of the painting is the foreground in this case. But what you see is the brightest, most reflective colors. The yellow is across this band here is what your eye goes to, but it's close to your eye. And then you get the whites. There's some shadow here, and the darkest dark here, okay. And it's not black. Artists don't use black, but it's so this would be on the dark scale 10. This would be closer to 1 on the light if it's 1's the lightest. And then you're going to have the middle ground, which is this cliff, and you can see that it's in more the middle range of values. It's been toned down. The light is toned down, except for a little, little reflective edge here and there across. but for the most part, almost all of it he's moved away from high values down to middle values. And all the colors in this, there's many colors in here, reds and grays and oranges, but he's working in that, say, 4, 5, 6 range of values when he's mixing the paintings, and it's to make it consistent. Okay. And if you mix complements, mix 2 complements like orange and blue, if you want to tone down a red, mix. You don't want to add black. You add its complement. So green, add a little bit of green, and it'll start toning, reducing the value when you mix it together. But he's done that consistently in this middle ground, and you can see that. So the reds here and oranges are lighter in value, and you get the bright white light here reflecting pretty strongly off these rocks in the stream, reflection there. And then we could divide this in the background into 2 sections, or you can just say it's all 1 section. But space, it's again, he's as objects recede in the background and atmospheric space, you're going to get more violet and more blue between you and the object. So he's taken the reds and he's added consistently the violet tones. And there's all kinds of subtle colors here. He's grayed it down, but it's not all one color. It's all very subtle, probably maybe 10 different colors, but it's all within the value range. Now we're talking maybe 2 to 3. And he's kept it consistent. And then it's not a really vivid blue. It's a whited out blue. So it's the blue of the sky and the rose here are all within that 2 to 3 value range. And mastering that is what creates a really realistic sense of perspective and distance in a painting. And it's all atmosphere. It's atmospheric perspective based using values. So, and like I said, so when you look at a landscape, how well has the artist mastered his use of values to create atmospheric perspective? And with amateurs, you'll see they don't quite have it right. They have a real dark in here, okay, or something in the background that's too saturated. And you get the idea what he's saying, but somehow your eyes getting confused. And actually, it's working unconsciously. It's like you're a little confused, but you don't even know why. Okay. I'll show you another one. Yeah, same thing. Urban landscape. Trolley. I like this painting. Right here. The light is coming from upper left this way, falling across the street, creating it. The light has to be over here because the shadow of the trolley is here. The lights are here up on the yellows. So this all in the darkest dark with the trees, and this is all the foreground, probably up to right about that line. Let's say it's foreground. There's the middle ground with the cars on either side of the trolley, and then it fades out. There's violets and toned down orange and ochres. There's an ochre here, pretty saturated, and then he's got it toned down, value grayed down. So anyway, the violet, obviously the trolley is the center of attention. Darkest here too. It matches the dark of the tree and the windows. Windows here in cars are dark, but it's not. If he was to use the same saturated dark in the window of these cars, it would pull the car up to the foreground. But he didn't do that. He's got a grayed down that dark windshield. Same thing with this tree. The tree looks behind this tree because it's toned down with violet, okay, which gives a sense of distance. This tree here too. A lot of violet. Tree bark isn't brown, never is. If you look at it, you'll see violet. Okay, so this person is a skilled artist. He understands, he or she, whoever did it, understands how to use values. And it's just interesting how the green recedes into the background. So yellow green just shifting, getting grayed out as it moves back. So the eye moves. So the eye just does two things here. You know, you're going to focus on the trolley and the colors, and then you're going to at some point move to the back just to see what's back there, and then come back and look at the trolley again. All right. What else I have? Shading techniques. Let's see what time I got. I'm not gonna have time to show all that video. Oh, let's do color as an element of art. Parts 2 and 3. Any comments so far on any of this? Hope it's useful. The
Yes.
ability to appreciate a work of a painting when you go into a museum.
Mhm.
You're not just looking at color.
Did you know Medicare doesn't always have the best price for prescriptions? Go to goodrx.com, use our savings card, or the free app where you can find better prices for your prescription.
Every color has three properties that can be used to describe it. Hue is the actual name of a color. This bird is orange. Orange is a hue. Hue is used to describe a pure color. We use value to describe a color's lightness
That's
or
great. There it
darkness.
is. Orange and all its different 1 to 10 values. Middle, it's getting very lighter and lighter. Okay.
This is a mid-value orange, not too light and not too dark. Intensity or saturation is another color property. It describes how bright or dull a color is. For example, this bird is bright orange. So each color can be described by its three properties: hue, value, and intensity. There are specific terms that artists use when describing different color variations. Hue is a pure color, the brightest possible color intensity. Adding black to a hue gets you a color shade. A hue and gray gives you a color tone. By mixing a hue with white, you will create a color
That's important to
tint.
know. You add white to a color, you get a tint. You add gray to a color, you get a tone. You add black to a color, you're getting a shade.
Color is the most emotional element of art. Different colors evoke different responses in the viewer. The response is based partly on physics, color's wavelength, and partly on psychology and cultural symbols and traditions. For example, white is a total reflection. It reflects all color rays, forcing the full spectrum into our eyes. It creates a barrier and communicates, "Don't touch me." It conveys purity, cleanliness, simplicity, and sophistication. That's why in many cultures, white is the color of a bride. But too much white can be cold, sterile, and unfriendly.
Documentary on white gets into that in great detail.
Being the longest wavelength, red is a powerful color. It adds gravity and awareness, quite literally, as it increases blood circulation, breathing rates, and metabolism. Red can take on a variety of meanings, from passion to aggression, from love to war, from warning to danger. But the unifying factor is a sense of importance. By nature, orange evokes feelings of warmth, excitement, comfort, and fun.
Here's Bonet's haystacks. Here's the shadows. When I said the impressionists put color in the shadows, it wasn't just some black or whatever. There it is. There's the shadows. It has colored shadows throughout. And No one had done that before consistently. Maybe a little bit, but not in my opinion.
Yellow is very emotional color. Its wavelength is relatively long and stimulating. Psychologically, yellow is the strongest color of all. It is often associated with happiness, but also activates the anxiety center of the brain. The right yellow will lift our spirits and self-esteem. Too much of it, or the wrong tone in a color scheme, can cause self-esteem to shatter and our fears and worries to intensify. Green represents nature, balance, prosperity. It is the most balanced color as it is positioned right in the middle of the spectrum, like a bridge between calming cool colors and energetic warm colors. Blue is a color that we trust. It is often described as reliable, peaceful, tranquil, and calming. Blue can also create a feeling of sadness and loneliness, like Picasso's paintings during his blue period. The shortest wavelength is violet, often called purple. Being the last visible length before the ultraviolet ray, it is associated with time, space, and the spiritual world. Purple communicates the finest possible quality and is often associated with royalty. However, excessive use of purple can cause a reverse effect and communicate something cheap and nasty. Black absorbs all colors and reflects none. Black is the absence of light. Its psychological impact is huge as it absorbs all energy coming towards you.
That's why I don't want to drive a black car or a real dark car in Myrtle Beach, for instance, or the South, with dark clothes, because it absorbs light and light gives off heat. So if you buy a white car, the light's reflecting off and it's not absorbing the light, and it's not absorbing heat. Same thing with white clothes.
Wavelengths are reflected, it can be intimidating and scary. Many people are afraid of the dark. It can evoke feelings of anger, aggression, fear, and sadness. In many cultures, black is associated with death, mourning, and everything evil. But black is more complex than that. It also communicates sophistication, elegance, and power. When it comes to painting, mix your own colors. Customize them, make them complex and interesting. Do not use paint straight out of the tube. Have fun with colors. You don't need to use pure green paint for a green area. You can achieve a large variety of greens by mixing other colors in different proportions. Can you see the slight variations of the colors? This would add air and a feeling of space to a painting. And most of the time, this is the effect you want to achieve. Primary colors can also use some personal touches. Whites and grays can also use some variety. See how vibrant the squares are? Try that.
Color schemes. So artists need to know the color wheel and the possible color schemes that can be used in the color wheel. And when you look at the painting, you can see what colors predominate in the color wheel.
It's Black Friday, our biggest sale of the year.
Kickstart
your studio with KRK monitors, 40% off.
A color scheme is a set of colors in an artwork chosen by an artist. It describes the overall selection of colors. Color scheme.
All right, so Van Gogh here is using a complementary color scheme where they're opposite on the color wheel. So blue and orange are complements. So he's using, variations of orange, and you move into a little next color next to it, yellow, and the color next to on the other side would be red. Okay, but it's not a vivid. But notice he's not using a vivid blue. This is an example that I was saying. You surround the color by its toned down complement, it'll pop out more. And he's done just that. And this is these blues are down on the value scheme. They're down towards the dark end and grayed out. So that makes this whole flower, some flower that have been plucked and jump out at you visually much more. So orange and blue are complements, and the secondary complementary colors is using violet and yellow are complementary colors. So that's a secondary use of complements here. And so there's the violets throughout here, and then there's the yellow here, and then there's a third very minor red and green are complementary colors. So there's little hints of green and little hints of red. So it's using 3 sets of complementary colors, primarily yellow and orange and blue, secondarily violet and yellow, thirdly red and green. You don't want to have, if you're going to use sets of complementary colors, you need to have one predominate. If you're going to do 3, just like he did, the second one that's less predominant in the painting, and the third one that's just barely there. That works best. If you had all 3 equally occupying spaces, that would be confusing.
Joe,
Schemes are used to determine.
Yeah.
I don't see any red at all. Now, maybe because I'm
Up here. Up here.
up
It's not,
there.
it's not a saturated red, but it's red.
Okay, I'll have to look at this book.
Right
or something.
here, right here, the little dabs are right here, right here. And also the cross hatching is a red. Yeah. It's not a vivid red, but it's red.
Okay.
All right. Here's what color do you see? If you don't see red.
Kind of a brown.
All right.
It-
Brown is on the red. It's a brownish red. Okay.
All right, I'll go with that. Okay.
It's not a pure brown, but no, it's not pure brown.
Yeah, I see it as starting with the lightest yellows and going.
Brown is an earth tone, and it's an earth tone that has red in it.
Okay.
Okay. But it's on the red side of the color wheel. All right.
The choice of colors that is aesthetically pleasant and creates style and appeal.
So, brown,
These color combinations are based on their position on the color wheel. When you're working with color schemes, you should consider each color's extended range. This includes its shades, tints, and tones. Achromatic means no color. Pure achromatic colors include black, white, all shades of gray and neutrals. Black, white, and gray work with all color schemes.
So there's grays that you can mix with black
The
and white.
achromatic
That's the
scheme.
Traditional gray. But the most beautiful grays that artists use, you usually don't see those, and particularly in landscapes, because there's no pure black or pure white in nature. But if you colored grays, where you mix complements, if you were to mix violet and yellow in equal proportion, it becomes a colored gray. And then if you tint it with white, it's these color grays are very beautiful. Okay? And so they're still called grays, but they're not grays made from black and white.
Is very harmonious. It is subtle and quiet in nature. There can be some color present, but only if it is kept unsaturated. Monochromatic colors are the colors of a single hue. That includes all color values. Monochromatic colors naturally create harmony. This scheme looks clean and elegant. Monochromatic colors go well together and produce a soothing effect. It is very easy on the eyes, especially with blue and green hues. You can use it to establish an overall mood in an artwork. Analogous colors are the colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. Analogous colors are often found in nature and are pleasing to the eye. Since analogous colors are located close to each other on the color wheel, it means that they are generally in the same family of colors. This also means that the color scheme is automatically harmonious. In other words, it's nearly impossible for the colors to clash. But on the other hand, it can be a challenge to create enough variety. Complementary colors are directly opposite each other on the color wheel. Both look their best and brightest when they're placed next to each other. When complementary colors are mixed, they create a neutral, brown.
Gray.
The high contrast of complementary colors creates a vibrant look, especially when used at full saturation. Complementary colors intensify each other. In color theory, this phenomenon is called simultaneous contrast. You can take advantage of this to help create drama in your artwork. A split complementary scheme is a variation of the complementary color scheme. It involves the use of 3 colors. Split complementary colors are the opposite colors, where instead of one complementary color, we use the 2 colors adjacent to it. Start with one color, find its complement, then choose the 2 colors next to it. This scheme has very strong visual contrast, like the complementary color scheme, but it has less tension and drama. Triadic colors are the 3 colors that form a triangle on the color wheel. They are evenly spaced and can be separated, for example, by 3 hues. This scheme would make a very bold statement. Imagine using all primary colors in one painting. Colors can also be separated by 2 hues. Triadic colors tend to be quite vibrant. You need to balance them carefully to achieve harmony. Triadic colors can also be separated by only 1 hue. Use colors in different proportions. At least one of them should be used as an accent color. The tetradic color scheme uses 4 colors arranged into 2 complementary pairs. It is also called the double complementary color scheme. This scheme offers plenty of possibilities for variation. The tetradic color scheme works best if you let one color be dominant. You should also pay attention to the balance between warm and cool colors. This scheme is hard to pull off, but when it's done correctly, the colors become mesmerizing. This color scheme is similar to a rectangle, but with all 4 colors spaced evenly around the color wheel. These color combinations are always loud and fun. Each color scheme is used in a particular artistic context, to express, to focus, or evoke certain emotions and response. Use them to your advantage.
Right. An artist will often choose
One day, my doctor
color
talked to me.
scheme they want to use before they start painting. And the balance, how they'll use each of those 2 colors, 3 colors, 4 colors. It gives us, when you do that, there's a sense of unity that gives to the canvas, to the color scheme that's pleasing, rather than just using, colors randomly. All right,
Joe,
Yeah.
when an artist does a painting, does he think of all these different schemes, or it's just intuitive?
well, in the beginning, you're thinking about it, and then it becomes more and more intuitive. But
Yeah.
yeah. But I think in the when I started painting, I want to think what color schemes what colors do I want to use? What color scheme is it going to be? Complementary, patriotic, whatever. It really helps to know that ahead of time.
So you plan that out. An artist will plan out his colors.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because you're making your palette can get real messy really quick, and then you lose sight of the larger scheme. You kind of get lost in the trees, and you lose the forest. The forest being the color scheme, the composition. So it really helps to plan ahead and just look at a color wheel and what colors do I want to use, and in what proportions. Yeah. And so it's there, and a non-artist won't know it, you won't see it, but if you're conscious of it, and when I look at a canvas, that's one of the things I look at. What's the color scheme that he or she's using? It's harder to see the complex ones, but the 4-color one it's harder to see. But actually, it would be helpful to have a color wheel in your hand or on your cell phone. If you want to just let's look at the color wheel and see what they're doing. That's probably a good way to do it. And so you're not focusing on the subject matter of the painting and or your emotions. You're just saying what's the color scheme that they use, and just so I'd learn to identify it. So yeah, next time you go to the museum, put up a color wheel on your or download it and have it there, so you don't have to go online, and then just look at the painting and try to decide what scheme they use. It's a great exercise. And interior designers, they have to know the color wheel and all the shades and tints and tones of each color. What was I here? All right, just one. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Let's look at. And the last big element is composition, and we can do a whole course of courses in our school on composition. That's I just have a 9-minute one here. We might have a few minutes to start the documentary, and we can finish it next time. We'll see.
Real fruit, whole grains, and chocolate.
Because something you probably wouldn't want to happen in your painting is for the emphasis to be on the wrong syllable. Composition explained. I'm explaining composition in the form of 10 shapes / concepts you can make with your art. Being conscious about composition can help you guide your viewer's eyes around the painting, help you tell a story more effectively, help them feel something specifically that you want them to feel, etc. To quote Henri Matisse, composition is the art of arranging in a decorative manner the diverse elements at the painter's command to express his feelings. Composition is basically how you arrange things on the canvas to create an overall piece of art. Where you put certain colors, how you use texture, form, blah, blah, blah. Rule of thirds. You can split up the canvas into 3 sections, horizontally or vertically, or both. 9 sections altogether. Using this grid can help you learn the importance of negative versus positive space, or where the most effective place would be to place an object or your subject. So having a centralized composition is okay, but what would happen if you moved it from the center of the canvas to the side, like one of the nodes? Or what if you moved it to the top instead of from the bottom? Play around with it. Golden ratio, or the divine proportion, the golden rectangle, the golden section, they're all explaining the same idea. Now, this is going to take a little bit to explain, but I think it's important. Basically, it's just another way way of organizing information on the picture plane or your canvas. I like the idea of using the golden ratio to develop compositions because it can help you easily locate naturally, aesthetically pleasing areas to distribute weight or emphasis. Because something you probably wouldn't want to happen in your painting is for the emphasis to be on the wrong syllable. So I'll show you how to make golden rectangle / the golden ratio. Here we go. First, we're making a basic golden rectangle, okay? You take a perfect square and draw a line in the middle. That's your 2 rectangles. Then you grab a compass and you take the length of one of the rectangles from one corner to the other corner and draw this little curved line and then connect the lines, and then that's your overall golden rectangle. That's an easy way to do it. There's math involved and it can get more complicated, but for all intents and purposes of how I'm trying to use this method, it's just towards composition. And unless your painting is super mathematically precise, most of the time you can just eyeball this. It doesn't have to be exact, but you're probably not watching my channel if you like things super precise, because I'm not precise. I like things just more natural and it just comes out of you. And I don't teach people to be precise. So there you go. Now we're going to take it a step further and break your rectangle up into the golden ratio and how you get that iconic spiral. We're going to use the Fibonacci sequence for this. Gets you very close. There's a lot more math involved, like I said. Basically, the sequence is you take the 2 previous numbers, you add them together to get the next number, and you start with a 0 and a 1. So 0 plus 1 equals 1. 1 plus 1 equals 2. 2 plus 1 equals 3, and so on. So now you take all those numbers, section up your golden rectangle based on those numbers. So how I learned to remember this in school is the 5, 3, 2, 1, 1. You have a square that's a 5 by 5 next to a square that's a 3 by 3, next to a square that's a 2 by 2, next to 2 1 by 1 squares. And then you can get bigger or smaller if you want to get smaller than a 1 by 1. The actual math is really like a 5 point something, a 3 point something, but again, we're just eyeballing it. It's okay. We don't have to be exact. Now you can create the iconic spiral. You connect section points. The spiral is reflected in all of nature, essentially. This is why this kind of composition is very naturally aesthetically pleasing, easy on the eye. People like to look at nature, and this is a natural shape in nature. Most of the composition shapes I want to talk about have to do with either reflecting elements of nature or are shapes that are familiar to the world around us. These compositions can happen unintentionally and subconsciously, which makes it kind of cool, and it's kind of fascinating to me. It's one of the many ways that an artist can essentially manipulate the viewer's eye into feeling something, thinking something, seeing something. Taking the same subject and applying different composition layouts makes the feel of it completely different. It would be like the difference of making the painting have an overall feeling of heavy, depressed, and trapped versus jovial, light, and happy. Cross or crucifixion. You're basically creating the shape of a cross or a T. This doesn't mean that your only subject is religious. In fact, I think stronger compositions only hint at the shape instead of the actual, this is a T. I think a lot of really nice abstract paintings have this composition layout. Compound curve. I would say that you can think of this as an S shape or a Z shape or Z. Your subject matter would be in the shape of an S, in the shape of a Z or a Z. This composition shape is super effective at moving the eye around the canvas from one end to the other. Consider this type of composition if you have a lot of movement or some higher energy in your painting. Pyramid or triangle. This is a classic shape in portraits. Pyramids are very strong and stable as a geometric shape. They have a stable base with a peak at the top. This type of composition would be helpful if you're trying to express power or consistency in your painting. Diagonal. This is great for showing perspective. Perspective is all about denoting the look of 3 dimensions on a flat surface, so creating the illusion of distance. This composition shape also helps subjects that involve movement or feelings of unrest or impatience, or just simply using the diagonal to direct the eye somewhere. Radial. Think of a spider web. This is very symmetrical. It's useful for subjects that have a heavy element, but then you can balance it out with other elements that radiate off of it, evenly spaced in between. This composition shape is kind of similar to the golden spiral. It's literally reflected from nature, and that's something that can be easily aesthetically pleasing to the eye. It's very simple, but effective. Focal mass or grouping. Think of this compositional arrangement as multiple objects placed near each other that may or may not have anything to do with each other, but make sense in your painting when they're grouped together. Like a still life of flowers, a skull, and some fruit. A skull has nothing to do with flowers by itself, but when grouped in a painting may bring some type of a meaning and symbolism, which contributes to the overall effectiveness of your painting. The L arrangement, similar to a triangle or a cruciform, the more geometric, you're using a horizontal line intersecting somewhere with a vertical line. The L shape can be moved, turned, or rotated somehow to create more depth. But generally, L-shaped compositions they're really good when you have a grounding element like a landscape, or oftentimes the L's are repeated to create a sense of harmony, repetition, stillness. A V arrangement. Another geometric shape-ish letter, often very defined. This arrangement is really good at pointing the eye toward something else in the painting. The focal point, you'll see this in a lot of mountainous landscapes, mountain, valley. And then when the V is repeated, it can also help denote distance or represent distance. If you learn something, have a question, or have a clean joke, let me know. Subscribe, hit the like button, and I'll see you in the next one.
All right. So that's just a very brief overview of compositional factors that are on the painting. Again, when you add up these formal elements, the composition, the color, the values, the use of light, line, the use of line, all color scheme, all this goes into how your response to the painting, how well the painting works, et cetera, et cetera. And it's all, most of it is implicit, except for colors, which, well, like I said, most people, yes, do you like or not like this painting? Well, I like the color will be the first because it's the most obvious, but most of these other elements that are there are very important, or implied, or there in the background, and you need to learn it. It deepens your ability to appreciate a painting, put it that way, to see the planning and the thought that goes into it. Any comments on any of that?
Joe, I don't understand. What is the golden spiral? Why do you use the golden spiral?
Right. Okay, because it's actually the Greeks did it. It's actually
what does it do in the painting, though? Where does it tell you where to put things?
It's where you're going to put things. Goldens. Hold on, let me see if I can find a better one, short one. Spiral and pink. You don't want to put. Usually, if you put, there's like a sweet zone. Golden ratio for this. It's 8 minutes. Let me think. Like on, let's just watch this.
Discover Werther's original caramel popcorn. Try it today.
Hey guys, welcome back to our Spiral channel. My name is Anastasia, and today I want to touch base on something that's really cool. So have you ever heard about those artists, myself included, architects, photographers, always chasing the perfect composition to try and present their work in the most pleasing way to the viewer's eye? Well, truth is, artists have been focusing on this for centuries, and a solution was eventually created by a series of mathematicians who figured out a way of life, so to speak. So if you're a beginner artist or you're an art lover who wants to know what's this golden ratio fuss is all about, this video is for you.
If this is your canvas, where are you going to put your focal point?
Okay, so it determines where you want to put things on your painting.
Yes, and it's where the focal point. Where that's
And the
supposed to
focal
be.
point is right at the
So,
center of the
yes,
spiral.
right there. So if you could have
That's the focal point right there.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, so that's the main idea.
I got it.
It's
Thank
not,
you.
yeah, because it's and it's this is found in nature throughout, so it's sort of it just resonates with the viewer that it feels right to have a focal point on a canvas like this here, rather than here, for instance, or rather than smack in the middle. All right, it'll feel more pleasing, more organic to have the focal point there. All right, and you can you can have a couple of focal points. You can have another one going the other way, and you might want to, I don't know where it would end up. But you see a lot of the, like particularly early Renaissance painters, looks like they had planned it that way, that they've done this golden ratio drawing to get where they want to, so the eye will just go there, and this could be the eyes of if it's a portrait. Okay, so okay.
You know what, Joe? I
Yeah.
think you can also connect this to seashells.
Yeah, definitely, because definitely that's the pattern that's found in seashells. Looks like it looks like a mollusk in a sea, definitely.
Well, I've lost the word, but I mean, it definitely has seashell-y qualities to it.
Oh yeah, but it's found throughout nature, all organic. Well, many will have it. What time we got? 3:51. I want to just get kind of as a taster for this documentary, and then we'll pick up on it. Okay. We can go for 10 minutes on this. This is a BBP series by the presenter who I like. He did Yellow.
Della civiltà italiana.
Blue, gold, and white. How are each? The history of each color.
This is the BBC television service. We now present another program in our series of experimental transmissions in color.
We live in a kaleidoscopic world. But colors are more than mere decoration. Colors carry deep and significant meanings for us all. And in this series, I want to unravel the stories of 3 colors. 3 colors which, in the hands of artists, have stirred our emotions, changed the way we behave, and even altered the course of history. Gold, its lustrous shine, has made this the most intoxicating color, one we've used throughout history to revere the things we hold most sacred. Blue. The arrival of lapis lazuli from the east made blue the color of our dreams, a color that's transported us to worlds beyond our horizons. And this is a story of white. Today, we see white as a color of virtue, a color of cleanliness, of innocence, a color as pure as the driven snow. That in the history of art, white isn't quite as pure as we think.
Over the course of history, it's been loaded with ideologies that are both divisive and at times even dangerous. So dangerous, in fact, that white may just be the darkest colour of them all.
This is a story of how the purest colour became corrupted. From the refined elegance of the Elgin marbles to the pristine pots of Josiah Wedgwood, we'll reveal how white came to symbolise an enlightened world. But we'll see how in the modern age, this once virtuous colour was used by artists, architects and sculptors to divide, to control, and finally, to conquer.
Stop thinking and believe in me, bellowed Mussolini.
It was Sunday the 25th of September, 1938. The director of the British Museum was on his evening rounds. Everything seemed to be in order, but unknown to him, a disturbing incident had been taking place right beneath his feet. In the basement, some of the museum's sculptures were in the process of being cleaned. But they were being cleaned with copper chisels and carborundum.
To make matters worse, the objects in question were some of the museum's most prized possessions, the Elgin marbles.
The Elgin marbles were a set of ancient Greek sculptures that had once adorned the Parthenon in Athens, and they were widely seen as the bedrock of Western art.
Greece wants those back, and the British Museum refuses to give them back. They were stolen in the 19th century.
Like many ancient sculptures, the Elgin marbles were once painted in rich colours, which over the millennia had washed away. Yet at one point, we became convinced that these sculptures had always been white, and now they were being made whiter than they had ever been before. The museum's director immediately put a stop to the cleaning and instituted an inquiry. The culprit was one Joseph Devine, a rich and powerful art dealer who had donated money for a new gallery to house the marbles, but had asked for something in return.
Joseph Devine thought the Elgin marbles were, quite frankly, the wrong colour. They were too brown, and like the rest of antiquity, they were supposed to be white.
Devine persuaded museum staff to whiten the Elgin marbles, and evidence of their handiwork can still be seen today.
So this is Helios, the sun chariot, and it's one of the objects that the director of the museum saw being cleaned that night in 1938. And you can see very clearly the effect of that cleaning. So on the right, this is before the cleaning. It's dark, it's brown, it's sooty, it's shiny. And here on the left, this is after the cleaning. It's matte in texture, it's colourless, and it's white.
It's Black Friday, our biggest sale of the year. Give them all they need to rock with a Les Paul pack, $50 off. Or
Back in the 1930s, Joseph Devine's cleaning job
caused 4 more minutes to the 10-minute mark.
Scandal.
It has been said that the British Museum trustees of the day lost control of their museum. And in a sense, that's true. The museum was unduly influenced by the strength of the personality of Devine. And the practice of scraping the surface of the sculptures was not approved. That's the important thing to get across. It was not an approved action. We must get this into proportion. The surface removal, we're talking of a fraction of a millimetre. And of course, it wasn't every sculpture that was cleaned. It probably doesn't much affect the moral question if we try to mitigate what was done. I don't want to defend it. What would be the point? It was 70 years ago, I wasn't alive, and everybody who was involved then is dead. But there was already a history to the surface of the sculptures, and it is part of that history that we add another chapter.
The debate over the cleaning will no doubt go on. But in our story of White, there's a more intriguing issue at stake.
So the big questions for me are these. Why was Devine so desperate for these sculptures to be white? even go to the lengths of damaging these sculptures to make them whiter? And why, when all the evidence points the other way, when we know that the ancient Greeks covered their sculptures in colour, do most of us still think, secretly, that they should be white? In my mind, one man is above all responsible for the whitewashing of antiquity. And in doing so, he planted white at the centre of European culture for centuries to come. His name was Johann Joachim Winckelmann. J.J. Winckelmann was born in 1717 in a rural town in what is now eastern Germany. His parents wanted him to follow the family profession and embrace the noble trade of the cobbler. But they should have known that young J.J. was not well suited to such a fate. Now, Winckelmann was not the typical 18th century cobbler's son. He was gay. His dress sense was extravagant, to say the least. He had a penchant for skin-tight leather trousers, and he was a fiercely ambitious intellectual. So naturally, he longed to set foot in more cosmopolitan surroundings. In 1748, Winckelmann fetched up in Dresden, and it wasn't long before he made a discovery that would change his life. Winckelmann had stumbled on a vast storeroom filled with ancient white statues. And they came in all shapes and sizes. There was plenty to, shall we say, feast his eyes on. There were buttocks aplenty, there were ripped, muscular torsos, and there was even the odd genital. These white sculptures were the most wonderful objects that Winckelmann had ever seen. And he decided there and then to dedicate his life to persuading the world of their beauty. He knew that he had to begin in Rome.
One there. I'll pick it up next time.
Oh, that is fascinating.
Yeah. He goes all over the place with this documentary.
Hard to stop.
Pardon?
I said hard to stop.
Yeah, it is. No, but don't look at it while we'll say
We
this.
have to hold off for 2 weeks.
Yeah, you'll do it next time, I hope.
Yeah, well, I'll pick up on it next time. It'll be the first thing we'll do. Yeah.
Good, good. That was very interesting.
That was
Yeah.
fun. It was a lot of fun.
Good. So, hope you learned a few things about the formal elements of painting and what to look for. You know, I just know personally for painting, you can't keep all that in mind. You go, you know,
Right.
I just like when you're playing music, all the formal elements of what goes into playing an instrument, you can't keep it in mind while you're playing the piece. It's just, it's there in the background. Hopefully it comes out intuitively, but you would never get anywhere if you had to keep everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
A lot of new vocabulary and alphabet.
yeah, I've got the color wheel in my mind, and I kind of.
I thought you had it on your computer.
Yeah, I have it there too. But I got it in a book in my art studio, and sometimes I look at it. But if I'm planning ahead what colors I want, I'll look at the color wheel. Then just forget it, you know. All right, great. So 2 weeks from now, I don't know what we'll do beside the documentary. I never know until I think about it. So,
It's always interesting.
Yeah.
great. All righty, have a good 2 weeks. So do we? I don't think we conflict with any of the holidays time. What's today? What's the date today?
28th.
So we got 2 more days. So that would take it to the December the But anybody have a calendar right there? What's 2 weeks?
I think it'll be the 12th, maybe.
Oh, okay, yeah, so it'll be all right.
Sounds
So
right.
Then next one, we'll have to decide if, we'll probably take the day after Christmas, we'll decide whether we want to do that or not. We'll talk about it.
Thanks for all your hard work, Joe.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, it's not really hard. I enjoy collecting videos, and it really doesn't take that much, and so it's a good learning process.
It's
for
so
me.
nice to share together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, it's fun. I really
Like
like
going
it.
to a movie together, like a whole theater going.
Yeah, exactly. Right. What do they call it on Amazon when you group together and people, a watch party? That's what it is. It's a just a
Yes.
watch party, right?
Or an around the world watch party.
And for the third couple of you in my Thursdays, Ukraine prayers, apologize for last Thursday. I just
No problem. It's
that
okay.
incident just happened, and I was just like,
We understood, Joe.
Yeah.
okay, so see you in 2 weeks. Have a
Okay.
Okay.
great, enjoy your
Stay
Christmas.
safe.
Enjoy your Christmas.
Bye-bye.